All right, so get this. We are diving into a Supreme Court case, and this one is big, like reshape how cities deal with homelessness, big.
No kidding, right?
It all starts in Grants Pass, Oregon. Have you heard about this one?
Yeah, I've been following it. It's the one where they're basically trying to outlaw sleeping outside altogether.
That's the one. It's like, if you don't have a roof, you don't have a right to sleep. Seems kind of extreme, right?
Yeah, it's pretty intense, and it's really impacting people. I mean, this isn't just theoretical. There's a woman, Gloria Johnson. She's at the center of this whole thing.
And now the U.S. government is stepping in. They've got this friend of the court brief, and it's fascinating.
Oh, tell me about it. It's like a sneak peek into how they're viewing this whole thing.
Right. They aren't picking sides or anything, but they're laying down the law, so to speak, on the constitutional side of things, like what's okay and what's not.
It's a big deal.
Huge. So give it to me straight. What's the government saying about all of this?
Well, first things first, they're putting it all in perspective. Did you know that on any given night, over 600,000 people are experiencing homelessness?
Wow. That is a lot.
It's a staggering number. And it's not just big cities. It's everywhere, every corner of the country.
It's true. You see it everywhere, but you never really think about the scale of it.
Absolutely. And the brief emphasizes this, that homelessness, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. Yeah, there are those personal situations, but it's also affordable housing, wages, can people afford a place to live? Then there's mental health services, the whole system. It's a lot.
It's like a perfect storm. We've all seen it. Someone huddled on a bench trying to stay warm, maybe a family living out of their car. It's tough.
It's really tough.
So Grants Pass, they're trying to tackle this by essentially making it illegal to be homeless. Is that what's happening?
That's the gist of it, yeah. They've got these ordinances, right, against camping on public property. But here's the kicker. Their definition of camping, super broad. We're talking any type of shelter. You could have a sleeping bag on the sidewalk, and that's a no-go.
Wow. So no sleeping, no shelter. What are people supposed to do?
That is the million-dollar question and why this whole thing is ending up in court. The government, they're saying these types of bans, they're basically criminalizing being homeless.
Which seems like a slippery slope if I've ever heard one. Where does it end? Someone has absolutely nowhere to go, and they're breaking the law just by existing.
It's a strong argument.
Yeah.
The government's worried, and they say it in the brief, if every town does this, homelessness becomes a crime, and then it's just pushing people from one place to the next without actually doing anything to help.
It's like sweeping it under the rug, right? Out of sight, out of mind. But these are people, and they have to go somewhere.
Exactly. And that's where this case gets really, really interesting, because it forces us to ask, what happens when someone has no other choice but to be on the streets? Can we punish them for just being?
It makes you think. Are we trying to address homelessness, or are we just trying to make it invisible?
Right. It's not as simple as just saying, go find a shelter. This gets complicated. And to really understand it, we got to go back to a big Supreme Court case from way back, 1962, Robinson versus California.
Ah, yes, Robinson. Time for a history lesson. Always fun. What was that one about again?
Basically, Robinson, you can't punish someone just for being a drug addict.
Interesting.
Yeah, the court, they decided addiction, it's a status, like a medical thing, not a crime in itself.
Okay, so you can't arrest someone just because they struggle with addiction. You have to catch them actually doing something illegal, like possession or being high in public.
Exactly. And that idea, that whole you can't criminalize a status thing, that's a big part of what's going on Grants Pass. Right?
I see where you're going with this.
Is being homeless, is that a status or a choice? That's the question.
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because it feels like that's the whole ball game right there.
It really is. And the government, in this brief, they seem to be saying that if someone literally has no other option but to sleep outside, it's closer to being a status. They're making the case that if you outlaw sleeping outside, no shelter, no anything, you're basically outlawing homelessness itself.
You're making it against the law to simply exist.
Exactly.
Which is a whole other can of worms. And this is where that government brief gets really interesting, because they go beyond the legal stuff. They're talking about what this kind of law means in the real world for real people.
Exactly. They're like, look, cities are worried about big encampments, the health risks, the safety, and yeah, those are real concerns for sure. But the brief argues that you got to handle those concerns without punishing people for just trying to survive.
Right. It's about finding that balance, I guess. Like, a city needs to be able to manage its public spaces, keep people safe, But people also have basic rights, even if they don't have an address. It's tricky.
Really tricky. And the brief even suggests solutions. Things like building more shelters, making sure people can get mental health help, helping them find a way out of poverty in the first place.
Because just shuffling people around from town to town, that's not solving anything, is it? It's just pushing the problem onto someone else.
Exactly. And it brings up something else that's pretty worrying, the discrimination angle.
Oh, right. Because it's not hard to imagine how these laws could be used unfairly against certain groups of people.
Right. If cities can just ban sleeping outside completely, that's a lot of power. And who are they going to target with that power? We're talking about people of color, folks struggling with mental health, veterans. It's a recipe for just pushing certain people out of sight.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. And that gets to the heart of what I think the government is trying to do with this brief. They're basically asking the Supreme Court to think bigger, to think about the consequences of this ruling. This isn't just about one woman or one city. It's about how we, as a country, treat those who need the most help.
It's a big deal. This case, it's about poverty, it's about inequality, it's about what we owe each other as human beings. It's kind of heavy stuff.
It is. It's about these fundamental questions. What does it mean to have basic human rights in this country? What does it mean to have dignity? What kind of society do we want to build? Those are the stakes here. And what's interesting is the government isn't saying, hey, Supreme Court, this is the answer. They're just putting it all on the table. The complexity, the human cost. They're asking the justices to really consider what's at stake with their decision.
It's like they're saying, we don't have all the answers, but for God's sake, at least ask the right questions.
Well, yeah.
It really makes you think about the bigger picture. This case, it's about way more than just one city trying to get rid of tents on the sidewalk.
100%. What happens in Grants Pass, it could impact how cities all over the country deal with homelessness for years down the road. It's setting a precedent.
It's like we're watching this battle play out, personal responsibility versus what we owe to each other as a society. It's tough. Where do we draw the line?
Right. And who gets to draw that line? That's the big question, isn't it? Because think about it. If the Supreme Court says, yeah, Grants Pass, you're good to go, it's basically open season. Other cities, they're going to look at that and say, well, we can do that too.
And that takes us right back to that question we keep bumping up against. Can you outlaw homelessness? Can you really tell someone they can't even exist in public when they have nowhere else to go?
It's a huge question, and it gets at the heart of, I don't know, what does it even mean to be a decent society? And the government, you got to give them credit. They seem to get it. They see how big this is.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, look, we might not have all the answers here, but we better be asking the right questions.
Absolutely, and the questions are tough ones. How do you protect individual rights while also looking out for the well-being of the whole community? How do you help people experiencing homelessness and treat them with dignity at the same time? There are no easy answers.
Definitely not. This whole thing keeps bringing me back to the idea of empathy. It's easy to make judgments about people experiencing homelessness, to see it as their problem. But this case, it reminds us that there's always a story, always circumstances, and honestly, it could happen to any of us.
So true. It's about seeing the human beings behind the labels, the statistics. It's about understanding the real struggles people are facing, lack of affordable housing, not enough mental health support. It's about recognizing that those 600,000 people the government talked about, they're individuals with lives, with stories.
It's about choosing to be compassionate, not judgmental.
Exactly. And you know what? While this legal battle goes on, there are things we can all do to make a difference right now. We can support the organizations doing the work on the ground, fighting homelessness every day. We can push for policies that create more affordable housing. And frankly, we can check our own biases when we see someone struggling on the streets.
It's a good reminder. This isn't just a bunch of lawyers arguing in a courtroom. This is real life, and we all have a part to play.
We do. This case, it's a powerful reminder that what we do, even in our own little corner of the world, it matters. It affects other people. So let's act with empathy, with understanding, and let's try to build a better world for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Until next time.